I wanted to talk about California administrative law publications. In Article 4 of Chapter 3.5 of Part 1 of Division 3 of Title 2, found in the California Government Code, there are set forth three administrative law publications required in the state of California. And Government Code Section 11344 requires the Office of Administrative Law, the OAL, to first provide for the official compilation, printing, and publication of adoption, amendment, or repeal of regulations in the California Code of Regulations, the CCR. And the OAL is required to make available on the internet free of charge the full text of the CCR. They can also contract with another state agency or even a private entity to provide this service. Second, OAL has to make available on its internet website a list of and a link to the full text of every regulation filed with the Secretary of State that's currently pending. Third, OAL has to provide for the compilation, printing, and publication of weekly updates of the CCR. And this publication is known as the California Code of Regulations Supplement. The fourth is OAL must provide for the publication dates and manner and form in which regulations must be printed and distributed, and ensure that these regulations are available in printed form at the earliest practical date after their filing with the Secretary of State. And finally, OAL must ensure that each regulation is printed together with a reference to the statutory authority pursuant to which it was enacted and the specific statute or other provision of law which that regulation is implementing, interpreting, or making specific. Then we turn to Government Code Section 11344.1 that requires the Office of Administrative Law to provide for the publication of the California Regulatory Notice Register, which is an official publication of the state of California, and that register is required to contain specified information, such as the notices of proposed action prepared by all regulatory agencies as they undertake rulemaking. It also has to include a summary of all regulations filed with the Secretary of State in the previous week. It has to include summaries of all regulation decisions issued in the previous week, as well as the reasons for any disapproval of a regulation, the reasons for not filing an emergency regulation, as well as the reasons for repealing an emergency regulation. Next, the OAL must establish the publication dates and manner and form in which the California Regulatory Notice Register has to be prepared and published. And OAL has to ensure that the notice register is published and distributed in a timely manner to the presiding officer, as well as the rules committees of the Assembly and Senate, and to all other subscribers. And finally, the OAL has to post on its website on a weekly basis the California Regulatory Notice Register, as well as one or more internet links to assist the public in gaining access to the text of all regulations that are proposed by state agencies. Government Code Section 11344.2 requires the Office of Administrative Law to supply a complete set of the California Code of Regulations, as well as the California Code of Regulations supplement to the county clerk of all 58 counties. Section 11344.3 specifies that every document, other than a notice of proposed rulemaking action, that's required to be published in the California Regulatory Notice Register must be published in the first edition of the California Regulatory Notice Register following the date of that document. Government Code Section 11344.4 requires the CCR supplement, and the notice register to be sold at prices that will reimburse the state for the cost incurred for printing, publication, and distribution of these three documents. Government Code Section 11344.6 provides that the publication of a regulation in the CCR or the CCR supplement raises a rebuttable presumption that the text of that regulation as published is the actual text of the regulation that was adopted. In addition, the courts are required to take judicial notice of the contents of each regulation, which is printed or which is incorporated by reference into the CCR as compiled by the OAL. The courts in this state are also required to take judicial notice of the repeal of a regulation as published in the CCR supplement that's compiled by the OAL. And finally, there's Government Code Section 11344.7 that specifies that no person or state agency is precluded from purchasing copies of the CCR supplement, or the notice register, nor from printing special editions of any of those and distributing them. However, when the purchase and printing is by a state agency, that state agency has to do so at their cost.